Weird stuff in a can today is explosion. Okay, here's something that's never happened to me before. I was sitting up in my studio and this box of cans of beer was sitting just on the side, not in any particular warm or cold or anything sort of place, and there was a loud bang and then a hissing noise, and the hissing noise allowed me to home in on what it was, and one of these cans has exploded in the box. So it's all leaked out. I've never seen anything like that before. That just spontaneously burst. And look at the deformation on the top of the can. So obviously something a bit wrong there. That was the sticky toffee pudding and custard porter. I can only imagine there's still some fermentation going on inside this can. And so maybe when it was canned, it was kind of accidentally conditioned. So rather like a bottle conditioned ale. So it's continued fermenting. Perhaps using the sticky toffee, the sugar from the sticky toffee syrup or whatever they added. I can only imagine that that's what would have done that. Some residual yeast has come back to life, carried on working, and blown that up. I'm not going to drink that, because it might not be yeast, it might be something else. In fact, I don't know that I'm going to drink any of these now, actually. Yeah, this one's deformed as well. Oh, this one's gone already. That one must have gone a while ago, because it's already blown up. And that one, well, the top does look quite tight there. So there we go, weird stuff in a can today is explosion. I'm not drinking these. That's a shame. I bet I can't get this set anymore. This was a set of beers. This contains apple crumble and custard pale ale, jam roly-poly and custard pale ale, sticky toffee pudding porter, and a roast dinner brown ale. The roast dinner brown ale is still intact. Well, I will open it and have a sniff, but I don't think I'm going to drink any of these because something's clearly wrong here. So yeah, that's where the can was sitting, and you can see that something is already wet and then dried. So that first can that burst must have been a while back. So it doesn't look like it's gone very far, but that will need a bit of a wipe over now and clean up, and that will need a soap to get it off. Oh, it's coming off. But there we go, that's an unusual experience. That's never happened to me before. Not with a product anyway. Obviously when I made ginger beer as a child we had bottles explode, but I reckon those beers are probably flavoured with some kind of syrup and they've started fermenting again in the can. And here's a weird thing, so I have never had a used before date be quite as accurate as that. So I have never seen anything like this. The date on these cans is the day before yesterday. So how about that for a product expiry? I should have got round to reviewing these earlier, but there we go. So that's that. So I don't suppose I even have a legitimate claim really. This is only a day over date and it's no good. But isn't that weird? That's gone one day over and boom. Now I've got rid of the other 3 cans now. And this is the roast dinner brown ale. The other can that hadn't exploded fizzed up everywhere when I opened it. I expect this one's going to do the same. Let's just have a look. That one's not so bad. Now this is interesting because this is the not so sweet flavoured one. So the other ones were dessert flavoured. This one hasn't done anything weird, and probably because it's roast dinner flavour, it hasn't got sugar added. And I think this is just because they've added sugar to the others and it carried on fermenting. I'm going to have a tiny little taste and probably spit it out. Now, bearing in mind I am tasting it after its expiry, 2 days after its expiry. It tastes like brown ale with something burnt added to it. So I suppose that's the roast thing. It tastes like beer with maybe like burnt potatoes added to it. The poor little dog was sitting right next to it on my studio chair when it went bang, and she ran straight out here and she's not gone back indoors since. Are you okay, baby? Are you alright, little baby dog? That was a bit traumatic, wasn't it? You're good. You're good. Let's play with your ball. Let's play with the ball. Here we are. Ready? Oh well, she's okay. So I've got 2 seedlings of Lesia peppers have come up now, and 3 of cayenne, although that one's looking very weird. I'm going to move these into the greenhouse now. I don't know whether I'll get the other 2 germinate in these, but it doesn't matter. 2 plants is probably all I really have capacity to grow this year, because these plants do get quite big. So anyway, these plants are going to get moved out to the greenhouse now. And the reason for bringing them out here is that they've got kind of all-round light. So rather than straining to get the light that's coming from one direction in a window, they've got the whole sky above them. So hopefully they should grow upright. They should go a bit stronger. My Scotch bonnets, they're not looking all that good. They're looking a bit sickly. I have been feeding these, and it doesn't seem to have been helping. So I don't know. We'll see what happens with the Scotch bonnets. They're not pot bound. They're just not really taking off. We'll see what happens. Maybe I'm not going to succeed with those this year. My Cape gooseberries are looking good. Gone a bit floppy. Lovely felty leaves. Just beautifully soft, downy leaves. So I've got 3 very strong plants, 1 not quite so strong, and 1 that needs a bit of catching up. But I think all 5 plants are going to do okay. I have also planted butternut squash. So we're going to grow some butternut squash up next to the courgettes. And these will climb up a trellis or something like that. So a very quick roundup of those blue, not blue sunflowers. These are the last 3 here that I haven't planted anywhere, because these are the ones I had to fish out the seed, and I've replanted it. And it's doing okay. They're not quite ready to go out yet, but they'll catch up. This is the one I've grown in a pot. I've put a cane in there, but I haven't actually tied it to anything. It's getting quite stout now, so that's good. 4 that I planted in amongst the courgettes are doing very well and have really started taking off. So there's 1 there, 2, 3, 4, all looking very good. And then the 3 that I planted over in this bed, this is the kind of not so fertile bed. They're still doing okay, and I think they will be all right. So I'm feeding them every time I water them, and yeah, they'll catch up. There's no sign of the ones I planted directly in the soil yet, but that is the update at this point in time for the blue, not blue sunflowers. No sign of flower buds yet, so it'll be another month or 2 before we see any sign of flowers. But at the risk of having to eat an edible hat, let me remind you, these are not going to be blue sunflowers. So these extra tomatoes I've grown on this side of the greenhouse, I've decided to try canes on these, even though I did use chains over here. This is an experiment. So this is what I would conventionally do, put a cane in the ground. The canes are wired to another cane that's run across the top of the greenhouse. So these canes are actually, although they are stuck into the soil, the weight, the load bearing is at the top here. This is tightly wired onto this other cane. So the weight of anything that's tied to the cane will be at least partly borne by the top joint there. 3 different varieties in that side, which are in tomato halos on top of a deep fill grow bag, with another grow bag emptied out on the soil surface underneath. And then 3 varieties in this one, which are just on top of a deep fill grow bag on top of the soil. There are holes in the bottom of both of these grow bags, so the roots can get out into the soil should they desire to do so. But these plants are looking nice and healthy. They just need to put on some growth now, put on some height, start producing flowers. The tomatoes over the other side, which are the ones I planted a lot earlier, I've got flower trusses. There's a flower truss there. That's the start of a flower truss there. So we're doing all right. We've got a way to go, but it's still only the middle of May. All of the chard is planted out now, and it's doing kind of okay. I'm feeding it regularly. It's not quite taken off and started zooming yet, but it should do. It's whole leaves that are going missing here. So the thing, whatever's eating the chard, is taking away whole leaves. That sounds to me like it could be mice. And that's the other half of the chard planted here. And again, I'm feeding this every time I water it. The shallots look like they're going to be a complete bust, to be honest. They don't look very good at all, but we'll see how it goes. The courgettes are taking off very nicely. You can see these plants are starting to get a little bit more robust now, and it won't be very long before they start producing those really stiff, prickly, dark green leaves, and then they start fruiting. In fact, we've got buds here, those are flower buds there, but they're probably going to be male flowers to start with until the plants have got some size on them. This yellowing of the leaf, I believe, is magnesium deficiency, and it's common on chalky soil because the nutrients get locked up. So I'm watering occasionally with Epsom salts. And we have a volunteer. This is a volunteer squash. I didn't plant this. This has survived the compost. So this could be a butternut squash, because we eat quite a lot of those. Or it could be the seeds from my saved volunteer squash seedling, because we ate a few of those last year as well. But I'm going to let that grow. It's not in the wrong place here, and it doesn't really add any extra risk of disease or anything like that, like potatoes would. So that's a volunteer that's going to be staying with us this year. We'll see what it produces. I just wanted to share these beautiful foxgloves with you. We didn't plant any of these. They self-seeded. One of these two is probably closest to the kind of wild type. We've got lots of white ones here. We've got some paler pink ones. We've got some that start off white and then turn pink as they age. Each one of these flowers will produce like 100 seeds in a little capsule there. And there are dozens of flowers on each stalk. Those seeds are tiny and very hard, and they fall to the ground and they can stay dormant in the soil for decades. So I said we didn't plant any of these. What we have done is a little bit of digging here, a little bit of kind of weeding and just planting and turning the soil over. And so in the process of doing that, these foxglove seeds got brought up to the surface and germinated. But I do think they're rather lovely, and I think actually the effect of having quite a few of them is worthwhile as well. Obviously they're a beautiful plant in themselves, but a group of them like this, just scattered through the other planting, really looks rather lovely. And fun fact about foxgloves, if you're growing these and you want to select for a particular colour, you'll notice that the pink ones have got more colour in the stalk here than the white ones. And so even before these flower, because it's a biennial, so one year it will produce leaves, the next year it will produce flowers. So even when they're in their leaf only stage, you can determine what kind of colour they're going to be just by looking at the stalks. So there's a lot more of the anthocyanins in there that have given this the purple colour in the flowers. They're also in the stalk. This one, however, which is white, has got a lot less of it, although there is some pink there. So that indicates to me this is going to be one of these ones like that, where maybe it opens white and turns pink as it ages. This one seems to have some yellow coloration in it, and there's almost no pink in the stalk. Let's find one that's pure white when it's fully open and see if that holds true. So here's one that's fully open and mature, and there's very, very little pink in the petals, or in the corolla tube or something is that called. And as you can see, there's hardly any pink in the stalks. So there you go. You can determine the colour that your foxgloves are going to be in the year before they flower, which if you want to select for one particular colour in your garden, or move things around or arrange them, we didn't arrange things here, nature has arranged these, and I think nature has done a rather remarkable job. But if you wanted to select for a particular colour, you can do that before they flower. This kitchen, which has been the Atomic Shrimp kitchen for the past 18 months, we're going to be waving goodbye to it fairly soon. We're not moving house again. This kitchen needs a bit of a revamp. Now, when we moved in, we did imagine we were just going to be able to spruce this up a bit. So we thought that these existing cupboards, we would just give them a lick of paint, maybe some new knobs on them or something like that. New worktops, obviously, because these things have seen better days. That laminate is lifting there. There's all sorts of nasties, there's broken tiles, there's all kinds of stuff that's not right. The floor has got holes and marks and stuff in it. We thought we were going to be able to give it a bit of a makeover and keep the existing thing, but that's turned out to be less than practical. But we wanted to give ourselves time to understand that and figure out what we would do instead. So I'm just going to talk about some of the things that are not quite right with this kitchen at the moment. Obviously the cosmetic stuff, so the worktops are just worn out. Those could be replaced, although there is a slight question of how we would integrate with these end units here. The kitchen itself has all been built by a carpenter. This is not standard units at all. These are cupboards that have been built to fit in timber, so these aren't separate units. This is one cabinet here that's got 3 cupboard doors in it, and it's nice. It's very traditional construction, solid pine, but there are some problems. One is that the main one is that this room is small and damp. This wall here backs onto the frog sanctuary alleyway that's behind the kitchen. That's basically the kitchen wall on one side, the retaining wall for the bank on the other side. Quite a lot of moisture comes through that wall. It's probably built in the 1950s. I don't think it has a damp-proof membrane. The kitchen's really narrow, and there isn't room to extend out this way without losing the front path. If I can show you that. So we could extend the kitchen out this way, but we'd have to move the path and then we'd lose part of the lawn. Don't want to do that. That would entail knocking this entire extension down, which is a bit too big of a prospect for us. So we've got this kitchen, which is a true galley kitchen. It's only 6 feet wide. That's about 2 meters wide from wall to wall. In fact, I can stand in the middle of the floor here and touch both walls. And there's the other problem, is that this is a standard cooker, and this is how far it sticks out. And it creates a bottleneck. So 2 people can't go through this thing at once here. You have to kind of, well, 2 very slim people probably could. So this cooker sticks out a bit too far. This is a gas boiler that runs the central heating and hot water. And I wish it wasn't here. It's taking up space we could use. The other thing to say is that because of the damp coming through these walls, we do know that the back of this cabinet down here is probably rotten. When you open these cupboards here, you can smell. It's not foul, it just smells like decaying wood. And this cabinet here, where we keep all the flour and stuff, we've had to put all the flour in plastic boxes, because if you just put a bag of flour in this cupboard, it will go mouldy from the damp. The damp's coming through the wall, or possibly permeating the whole room. So the plan is to redo this kitchen completely, and that's going to be quite the nuclear option, which is take out this fitted kitchen, strip the walls back to brick, because at the moment they've got this weird like fiberboard insulation. It's not asbestos, it's some sort of wood fiber type of board. And then tank the walls, re-insulate the walls, install a brand new kitchen with different appliances. So we're not going to have a cooker that sticks out here. We're going to have a built-in oven that goes up the end here and a built-in microwave. And we're going to have a hob that better fits this narrow galley kitchen. We are probably going to lose a little bit of storage because we're going to lose some of the depth of the cupboards, but there's plenty of storage elsewhere in the house that we can use for various things. So we're going to try to make this kitchen more functional. The boiler is also going to be decommissioned and a new boiler installed in the utility room. So we do regain this bit of space here. This was once the outside wall of the original cottage. This bit is an extension here. So this wall here behind this panel is quite an interesting and oddly rough wall. And the windows are going to get redone as well. I think this is probably the oldest window we've got in the whole house. And I think this leaded glass window has been moved here from the original cottage when those windows were taken out. So I think that was reinstalled here. But this window doesn't open because the frame on the outside is completely rotted away. So we are going to get modern windows installed because this is not a listed building. This is not a particularly historic building or anything like that. It's more important to make this into a functional building than it is to make it into some sort of anachronistic vintage character cottage. This is a 1950s extension. It just needs to be made into a functional room. And we're going to get some heating installed in here as well. There's no heating in this part of the building, which contributes to the problem with damp. So there's going to be baseboard heaters put in there. Underneath the cabinets, a sort of flat low-level heater that just blows air out into the room from the bottom. And those will be plumbed into the gas central heating. So those will be radiators that have a little fan that blows air out. So basically it is the nuclear option, strip everything out. That extractor fan that we had fitted as a kind of temporary measure to try to control the damp in here, that'll be decommissioned, taken away, that hole blocked up, and we'll have a proper extractor fan over the cooker. So the next couple of videos might be the last time you see me cook in this kitchen. In fact, by the time you're watching this, it may have already happened. Time for a little bit of cooking from the garden. So, let's have a look at what we got. We've got some parsley here. It's gone a bit leggy actually. She's trying to go to seed, but that's normal for parsley in its second year. I'll start some more in a different patch. It is a biennial, so it does this. Let's have a couple of bits of parsley. Chives. I don't have garlic chives today. From the upstairs garden. First courgette flower. Courgettes aren't producing yet, but there's the first flower, and it is a male flower, so there's nothing for it to pollinate. So I will make use of that flower. Completely edible. Some of this chard here hasn't completely taken off yet, but we can have a few leaves of this. I've got some more chard here, so we'll have a bit of this as well, just to keep things balanced. Broad beans. These are doing very well now. This half is the ones we planted in autumn. And there are beans in here that need using. So we will have a few of these. Just a few. Now down here we've got somewhere, there we go. This is wall pennywort. This is one of my wall pennyworts that I've planted, and you can see it's flowering. So we'll just have one of the leaves off that. Tomatoes not yet, but it won't be long. We've got tomato flowers aplenty. But these marigolds, the petals are edible, so we'll have a few of those. So a few from that orange one. And a few yellow ones. And a bit of savoury. And a little bit of sage. Right. Things that could have been soil splashed, like the charred leaves, I've given a quick rinse. And these broad beans, they are a little bit on the small side. Obviously I'd get more of a harvest by waiting a bit longer, but when they're small and young and straight from the garden like this, they're incredibly tender and hardly need any cooking at all. In fact, you can eat those as they are. Well, that's quite pretty, isn't it? To these vegetables, I'm just going to add a bit of smoked red cheese. This is Dorset red Leicester style cheese, but smoked, I think oak smoked. I'll cut into smallish pieces. And 2 eggs. Bit of black pepper, bit of salt, which will help to loosen the proteins in the egg. Over here at the cooker, bit of butter, a little bit of olive oil, just a combination I happen to like. And those broad beans can just go in there and gently cook in that butter for a minute or two. Turn that right down while we just get a couple of other things ready. That will save for whole. These bits here, I think I'll just chop them all up. So that's herbs and the chard. That's enough. Broad beans have just popped, that's good. So, courgette flour. I'll try and get them in like that. Herbs. Egg. Just give that a little jiggle just to get it so it's in full contact with everything else in the pan. The heat is now on its lowest setting. cheese. I'm just going to cook that now until the egg sets. It's going very, very gently. Okay, let's see how easily this will fold up. Not bad. Also not bad. This is the tricky one. But I think I pulled it off. All right. So, garden herb and smoked cheese omelette. Oh wow. Everything tastes so fresh. That smoked cheese is almost like having a bit of smoked salmon or something in there. Kind of really savoury, really nice and gentle smokiness at the same time. That's nice. Wall Pennywort. Just a really nice, softly crisp salad vegetable. Lovely melty cheese. And I don't think these marigold petals have a lot of flavour, but they're so pretty. Really happy with that, and there is just something incredibly nice about being able to eat things when they're so fresh. I'm sure some of it's psychological, but that's happening in my brain right here, and that makes it real. Today is the day when Eva has to take her medicine. And this is for worming. I think it's worming. Dronsit. Now with some of her other pills she has to take for various things, ticks or whatever, they're kind of chewable tablets and they're quite palatable to dogs. This one though is just a regular pill and quite a big one. Now it can be difficult to get animals to take pills, so I'm going to share a trick which works on Eva. It might not work on every dog, but works on Eva. Of course, wrapping it in something that the dog finds palatable is the trick, but there's an extra bit of the trick. So I've got some cheese here. I'm going to cut it into 2 pieces. I'm going to sandwich the pill between these bits of cheese and kind of smoosh this. I've used a squishy cheese, so I'll smoosh this around it so you can't really tell there's a pill there. Okay, now watch what happens. So I've got my 2 pieces of cheese. This one has a pill in it, and I'm going to exploit a bit of dog psychology here. If there are multiple pieces of food available, dogs will rush to eat them. Obviously, it makes perfect sense when food is scarce in a natural environment. Would you like some cheese, Eva? So I'm showing her that I've got 2 pieces of cheese. Okay. Right, now, eat this one fast, and you can have this one. There you go. Good girl. Good girl. There's no more. Not for now. You may go. Cheese is gone. So that trick works very well for Eva. I don't imagine that will work for every single dog, but it is part of dog psychology that if there are multiple pieces of potential food available, they will tend to rush to eat them. If you've been struggling to get your dog to take pills, that might work for you. I hope it helps. It's the 5th of June, lots of updates. The littlest watercress farm is actually thriving now, although we can see that there are some flowers being produced. This watercress is trying to go to seed. I will pick off the flowers and prevent it from going to seed because I think that will probably suppress it from producing more leafy growth. But it seems to be thriving. We're picking watercress from this daily now, and the pump is still running. The rocks have gone really green because I fed it up a little bit and it's now quite vigorously growing. I think I was underfeeding it. Tomatoes are doing very well. We've got flower trusses on nearly every plant now. More over there, more here. The interim result on using chains to tie them up versus canes. Chains are a lot easier to tie in because when you tie into a cane, you have to tie it onto the cane first, ideally to stop that slipping up and down, although you can see there that hasn't really worked. So you have to tie a double knot onto the cane and tie that tight, And then you have to tie a loop around the tomato. With chains, you just pass the string through the link of the chain and tie a loop around the tomato. So it's only 2 knots, it's only a double knot there. A lot easier to tie in. Now, you can see though, this tomato is leaning over to one side and it's pulling the chain with it. But I think as it grows up, it's going to have less of an opportunity to do that. So the chains are less rigid and they are going to allow the tomatoes to flop around a little bit, but not enough to be a problem, I don't think. But yeah, significantly easier to tie into. It might well be that chains anchored to the ground underneath the tomato planters might be better still. Maybe that's something I'll look into for next year. So let's just have a look. The ones that are in the greenhouse soil, this is greenhouse soil plus compost with these tomato halos on top. These are done very well. And so if we compare, this is Marmande here. Let's compare like for like. So this is Marmande, this is Golden Sunrise, so this is the F1 hybrid. We expect that to be doing a bit more vigorously. So that's Golden Sunrise there, and that's Marmande, so smaller. The leaves are paler in here, so this is tomato halos on top of a grow bag, pierced at the bottom with another grow bag emptied out underneath. This is tomato halos on a grow bag just straight on the soil without another grow bag underneath, again pierced underneath. Now what's interesting here, the leaves are darker green on these than they are on these. Even though these have got more compost, these are doing better, and these have got more direct access to the soil, so these haven't got to go through as many layers of compost before they get to the greenhouse soil. And of course these, although there is compost in the soil, these are the ones that are doing best of all. So my inclination is to say that actually the plants that have the most direct contact with the natural soil are the ones that are doing the best. So I think as a strategy going forward, these tomato halos on the garden soil with compost and fertilizer in should be fine. These square tomato halos are less good than the round ones. The drainage holes are just stupidly small in these square ones, and they don't drain. The tiniest little bit of compost or debris that gets in there will block the holes, and then they just don't drain at all. So these have got slightly larger drain holes. So I think before I use these again next year, I'm going to drill out those drain holes and drill them a little bit bigger. They were like little pinholes. I should have anticipated this. Anyway, chard and lettuce is doing okay. Chard's doing reasonably okay in this plot now. This plot didn't do very well last year either. The other chard over here, we're picking from this daily now, so this is doing really well. And what's interesting here is these plants were all red when they first came up as seedlings, and they've changed. So we've now got a white one, we've got a kind of salmon coloured one, bright shocking pink, orange over there, there's a yellow one in here as well, more white, deep red at the back there. So all different colours. These all came up as red seedlings, but as they aged a little bit, they've changed colour to the bright lights variety that they're supposed to be. Radishes I don't think are going to come to anything. Fennel, well, the Florence fennel looks like it might. I keep on feeding that. We might get some Florence fennel. And the shallots are just hopeless. I don't know what we did wrong there. I think this bed just hasn't got enough nutrients in it. Today we've got the first female courgette flower. So, and I'm not being cute, they are male and female flowers. So you can see this flower here is a male flower. It's just got a stalk on the back of it. This flower here is a female flower. It's got an embryo fruit on the back of it. So that's a small undeveloped courgette with the female flower on it. Male flowers are typically a little bit smaller as well. So I will make sure that gets pollinated, and we should have our first courgette in a few days. Butternut squashes are in. They need to do some catching up, but they'll pick up. Lots of new growth on them. And of course the sunflower update. So this one I put in the pot is the one that's doing best of all, and I think that is the start of a flower bud there. So it's not going to get massively tall before it flowers. It will maybe grow another, 20 centimeters or something like that before it flowers. So that one's quite close to flowering. The one that's even closer is this one here. That definitely is a flower bud there. And so my blue, not blue sunflowers are going to have flowers on them within a few weeks. That's another flower bud there as well. So we should be able to get to the point where we can judge the colour of these sunflowers, and of course it's going to be yellow, fairly soon. Right, well, that's the kitchen finished with. So I'm actually going to take these doors off before the build gets here. I'll keep these cup hooks. I'm going to keep this hardware off of the doors because these are nice brass hinges, they're good quality. So I'm going to rescue them. The rest of it I think is probably going to end up as firewood. It's a shame because it is a nicely made kitchen, it's just completely worn out. So welcome to Atomic Shrimp temporary kitchen for the next fortnight or thereabouts. We've got our old camping stove, 2 rings and a grill. We've got a tiny fridge, just big enough for 1 bottle of milk. Kettle, toaster, microwave, because we've still got electricity for most of the time when the project's running. So this is the kitchen for the next week or 2 or 3, with easy access to the vegetable patch and a printer if we need a printer when we're cooking, you know, because sometimes you do. My courgette plants, some of them have got yellow leaves, or yellowing of the leaves, and I thought there was something wrong with them. I think in this or a previous video I diagnosed them with magnesium deficiency, and I've been watering them with Epsom salts. That hasn't done them any harm, but the real reason for the yellowing of these leaves turns out to be something a bit different and interesting. We've got 2 different varieties of courgettes in here. We've got one called Black Beauty, which produces very dark green courgettes, and we got another one, I can't remember the name, but it produces yellow courgettes. Might be called Banana or something like that. And guess which plants are the ones that produce yellow courgettes? Well, now that the embryo fruits are starting to appear, we can see this one here, for example. This is going to be one with yellow courgettes. You can see them developing just there, and it's got yellow leaves. This one here, there's no yellow on those courgettes. Lovely lush green leaves. This one here's got yellowish leaves, and if we look we can see yellow courgettes. There's one more over here. It's got yellowish leaves. That's coming from this plant here, which has yellow courgettes. This one here, no problem at all, and that's green courgettes. So the yellowing of the leaves appears to be correlated with the yellow courgettes, so it's probably not even an ailment. It's probably just that this plant doesn't produce chlorophyll in such great abundance, or doesn't distribute it in the same way that the green courgette plants do. So yellowing of the leaves on yellow courgettes appears to be normal. They're all getting the same feed anyway, and obviously the green courgettes are not exhibiting this, probably not a problem, this attribute. So this is at the end of day 2 of the strip and rebuild. To our slight surprise, we did find this is actually a cavity wall. I had it in my mind all along that this was a single skin of large blocks, but there is a cavity, if you can call it that. There's maybe an inch of cavity there. The windows have been replaced with modern windows. The little lead window that was here, I've saved the leaded sash from, and I will see if I can make a project that makes use of that. It does need a bit of repair. So this is where the boiler was, and this is actually the end wall of the, or the corner wall of the oldest part of the building. So this is Victorian, and this is built from cob, which is just rammed earth. No cement, no bricks, no blocks. This is just a chalk and flint wall that's been rammed down. So boiler has gone from here, cooker has gone from here. We did actually find, when we were doing this, that's the flue hole for the boiler that was here. There was also another flue hole there, suggesting that there might have been an oil-fired boiler here, or maybe an Arga or something here before. Also, this bit here used to be a door. You could see that there was a clear outline of a different kind of blocks here. In fact, you can see they're different blocks. So these are a sort of a sandy coloured, and these are more grey concrete blocks. So there used to be a door here, which probably means that was the original outside door. And I think what probably happened is that this extension was built onto the old cottage. This outside door became an inside door.
And then the new front door to the main part of the living area was cut in and added after this. So we think this extension was built with this as the door, and then access to the building via there. And then at some point somebody said, well, that's awkward, and also we could do with the wall space here. Brick this up, cut a new door over there. So it looks pretty horrific at the moment, but you should have seen it at the end of day one. I did have my doubts originally about whether we were doing the right thing at getting this all stripped out, and whether we maybe should have gone for the whole thing about giving it a lick of paint and living with it. But when I saw the state of the boards that came off the wall, it was clad with a sort of fiberboard stuff. I think we did the right thing. So new pipe work is going up in the ceiling, so we don't have any more of the surface mounted pipes. And then that's going to be insulated, and the whole ceiling insulated and infilled, and then a new ceiling fitted. And the ceiling's been dropped down by about 60 millimeters as well, which hopefully should deal with some of the echoing that we used to have in this room.
So here's a thing I've noticed for the first time today. There's a lot of flowers on this courgette plant here, which is encouraging. But I noticed today that courgette flowers are retroreflective. So I was just passing this plant here, and well, obviously you can't look at it from the exact same direction as the sun because shadows exist. But when you get close to the same angle as the sunlight is landing on it, the yellow suddenly gets much brighter. You might be able to see this better than I can because the shadow of the GoPro camera I'm using is smaller than the shadow of my bulbous head. But I'd never noticed that before. So courgette flowers are slightly retroreflective. That is interesting. And actually, when we look at the surface texture of them, they've got a kind of granular surface texture. Now, one way that things can appear to be brighter when you're looking at them from the same direction as the light source is if they're hairy. Because when you're looking in the same direction as the light source, all of the shadows are hidden behind the things that cast the shadows. And so that can make things look really bright. So if you're flying in an aeroplane over a field of wheat, for example, and you see the shadow of the plane you're in cast on the field of wheat, you'll notice that there's a kind of bright spot around the plane. There are a bunch of different phenomena going on there, but one of them is the fact that the shadows of the wheat stalks are hidden from you by the wheat stalks themselves. So the light is coming from the same direction as your line of sight, and so the shadows are directly behind the things that cast them. So that could be the effect here, except courgette flowers are not hairy. I suppose they are ever so slightly downy, but looking at them here, they do seem to have almost like a sort of crystalline coating, like a shiny sparkly coating. So I think it's perhaps more likely the case that there are some specialized cells on there, or structures that are transparent and perhaps are acting as tiny retroreflectors. That's an interesting thing that I've noticed. I mean, I've grown courgette plants for decades and I've never noticed this before, just because the shadow of my head happened to pass across the flowers this morning. How about that? Retroreflective courgette flowers. Now, usually in nature, when things like this happen, there is a reason for it. The reason might just be that those structures are useful for something else, like keeping the plant moist or something, and the retroreflection might be a kind of accidental side effect. But these are flowers, and so it's quite likely that that effect is part of the thing that attracts insects to these flowers. So perhaps the reflected light happens to be extra bright if you happen to be an insect flying here. So maybe that means that you're, as an insect, attracted down a ray of sunlight to the flowers. I don't know. If you know more about retroreflection in cucurbit flowers, please let me know in the comments. So I went and did a bit of Googling overnight. Yesterday's footage was what you've just seen, just to see if anybody was talking about retroreflection in courgette flowers or cucurbit flowers. Can't find anything online about it. Am I the first person to discover this? It seems unlikely. I did also notice that the footage didn't come out all that well, and you can't really see the effect that I'm describing. So I will see if I can lock down the exposure on my other camera and see if I can actually get it for you. It's also worth mentioning that there's a whole collection of different optical phenomena that are kind of loosely related to direction of light source. For example, glory is another one, and you will often see that if you're watching the shadow of a plane you're flying in as it falls on clouds or mist. So if I've forgotten to mention your favourite optical phenomenon, do feel free to talk about it in the comments. So we're out for a little walk in the woods, and I thought this was interesting. This might be worth a look. This is a thrush anvil. So a type of bird called a thrush eats a lot of snails, and there's lots of bits of broken snail shell around here, and it looks like they've been smashed on this rather jaggedy rock here. So this is a spot a thrush brings snails to, bashes them on that piece of rock there, and then eats the snails. That's a thrush anvil. So here's an interesting plant. This is called tormentil. This is a species of potentilla. There's lots of it down here. This thing with the yellow flowers, by the way, I'm talking about. There's loads of it in this bank here by the side of a path. And it's a potentilla. So it's in the rose family and related to strawberries, for example. Quite closely related to strawberries, potentilla. There's something odd about this plant. I'm just going to leave the picture of it on the screen here. See if you can tell me what is strange about this plant. See if you can spot it. Okay, time's up. What is strange about this plant is that most of the flowers only have 4 petals. Rose family flowers normally have 5. So something weird is going on with this plant here, and I think it has 5 petals, but one of them just doesn't develop or something like that. Usually. There are exceptions. There are always exceptions. There's one there with 5 petals. But the majority of flowers on this plant only have 4 petals, which is not standard for rose family plants. Earlier in the video, we looked at the foxgloves in our garden at home. This is a wild foxglove. So this is the true wild type. And actually, now I've seen this, on reflection, I don't think any of the specimens in our garden at home are actually the wild type. This is just a slightly deeper, prettier pink, I would say. The flower tubes are, the corolla tubes are a bit more slender in these than they are in the ones in the garden. The spots are smaller inside as well. The patterning inside of the throat of the corolla tube is more delicate. The plants aren't quite as tall, but I think that's probably just conditions. And the thing with wild foxgloves is they only ever have the flowers on one side of the stem, like this. And I think some of the specimens we've got in the garden have got the flowers all the way around. I say they only ever have the flowers on one side of the stem. They usually have the flowers on one side of the stem. There is an unusual specimen out here in the wild with flowers that are equally spaced all the way around the main stem. And of course the ones we've got in the garden are not especially cultivated. They're not hybrids with any other species or anything like that. They're just selections from mutations that have happened naturally. I don't know how well you can see this on camera. There are loads and loads of foxgloves in a line that extends right the way across this heath here. This heath wasn't always a heath. You can see they've done some forestry, some clearing. That's just part of forest management. But there is a very conspicuous line of foxgloves right there, diagonally across the view here, which I think we would find if I was to go looking in there. Let's see if we can see the end of it. Well, it corresponds with the opposite of the end of this track here, and so in a line straight through there. But I'm willing to bet that there is a track where forest workers' machinery, a truck or a trailer of some sort, drove through here, churned up the soil, disturbed the soil, brought the foxglove seeds up to the surface and made them germinate. And that's why those foxgloves are all in a straight line, straight down there. So you might be thinking, okay, well, what's the use of a plant that doesn't do anything unless the soil is disturbed? What is the use of a seed that stays in the soil forever and only comes and germinates when humans dig up the soil? Well, I suppose the answer to that is there are other things that dig up the soil. So I mean, wild boar and things, when those were common here, would go through and disturb the soil. But another thing that disturbs the soil is tree falls like this. So when these trees have fallen over, this has only just happened in the winter just gone. So if we come back here next year, I would expect to find foxgloves around the base of where these trees have fallen over, because they've torn up the soil, they've exposed some buried soil and brought it to the surface. So I would expect to find foxgloves in this little clearing that's been created here. Welcome to the comment positivity section. Today from the garden, because the house is still a bit chaotic from all of the building work and renovation and stuff that's going on. Anyway, so this is just where I'm going to pick out a handful of comments that made me smile, ask a question I feel like answering, or maybe just uplifted me or added to the positivity of the comments in general. So starting with just watching the part about normal cooking. Do you ever order a takeaway? If so, what's your go-to? So we don't need that many takeaways. I would say probably once a month or something like that at most. Most often that'll be Cantonese, Chinese. Yeah, a few times a year probably. More commonly, if we want something that's not too difficult, it'll be something like we'll buy a meat pie, and then all we got to do is cook mash and peas to go with it. Right, Mr. Shrimp, no plans for going the full good life and raising some livestock? A couple of questions about that actually. Probably not. I did think about it. I would like to keep quails or chickens or something like that, but it does tie you down a little bit if you want to go away and spend a few weeks away. We'd have to find somebody to look after them while we're away, and we haven't figured that bit out yet. Also, it might be a little bit of a problem with Eva because she does like to interfere with small animals. I did hear about a kind of scheme where you could keep catfish in a big tank or pond, and then the water from the catfish could be cycled through a hydroponic system, so you grow tomatoes and other vegetables in the water from the catfish, and that purifies the water but also feeds the plants with the waste from the fish. And then all of your kitchen scraps go into a bin, into a compost bin, where you breed worms, and the worms are fed to the catfish. So not a closed system, because obviously you'd have to add things to it anyway, and probably additional food more than just the worms. But I did toy with the idea of doing that, mainly because actually when we were moving here to Shrimp Cottage, before we looked at this house, we looked at a house that had an enormous koi breeding tank in the garden, and the idea started to go off in my head about maybe we could breed fish for the table in that tank and in that setup. But yeah, it's a lot of faff, and so I haven't actually pursued that. Probably won't do it. I guess it might be an idea to find out if I like eating catfish first. I've eaten it a few times, but I hadn't really thought about whether I want to eat a lot of catfish. Anyway, this was from the Sky Onions thing. Love the animation. As a science teacher, just wanted to say it was really clear and informative without being oversimplified. What software did you use for it? I've been trying to pick up some kind of animation skills along the way, and I did think about using animation software. There's a free animation suite called Synfig that's really, really good, but also quite a steep learning curve. And so I've downloaded it, I've had a play with it, I can use it, but I didn't use Synfig for that. What I actually did is just created a load of different pieces of plants in a graphics drawing program. It's transparent PNG, so it's just leaves and flowers and bulbs and stems and whatnot. And then in DaVinci Resolve, that you can keyframe the movement and scale and transformation of those individual pieces of graphics. So that's how I did it. I just used DaVinci Resolve and motion stuff in DaVinci Resolve in the edit timeline just to move around and rescale and resize the graphical pieces that I designed in an ancient piece of software called Photo Impact, which is still the thing I use for making my thumbnails and everything, because it's what I got and I know it inside out. So yeah, I just use that. I think I would like to set aside some time to learn properly an animation suite. Adobe Animate would probably be the easiest one in terms of learning curve, but I don't want to give any money to Adobe. This was on the AI cat flower seed video, and I'm not going to stop labouring the point that you don't have to be stupid to fall for a scam. There are scams out there that will catch anyone. We all have weak spots. Certainly the cat flowers one is a fairly obvious scam. I wouldn't expect most people to fall for that. I'm pretty sure those cat flower seeds are clickbait, and so that's to drive traffic to the scam site, to make it ascend in the search ranks. But things like blue sunflowers, who's supposed to know that blue sunflowers don't exist? I know that blue sunflowers don't exist, but if you're not a gardener, or if you're a first-time gardener, how are you supposed to know things like that? That's not that unlikely. Interestingly, a lot of people reacted to that video by saying, of course blue sunflowers don't exist, no blue flowers exist, which really boggled my mind, because I can see blue flowers from here. Under the hedge over there, there's some speedwell, which is undeniably a blue flower. There are blue flowers, nature does produce blue. Nature doesn't produce very many blue mammals, and hardly any of the foods we eat are blue. And so that little factoid got kind of expanded into nature doesn't do blue. It does. Blue flowers are quite interesting, actually. There's enough subject material in there for a whole video, actually, about what blue flowers are, because nature has to do some really quite interesting things to make flowers blue. But it can do it. Forget-me-nots are blue. Quite a lot of other plants in the borage family are blue. There are blue poppies. There just aren't blue sunflowers and blue roses. There's a genetically engineered blue rose, but it's not really blue to look at, because the rose family doesn't have the kind of cellular machinery that other species of flowers that are blue do have inside the cells. Anyway, I digress. So anyway, by the time I got to the middle portion, I found myself learning the same lesson just from watching the video, because when I saw those AI cat flowers, I was straight into scoff at anyone who thinks these super fake AI pictures are real mode, only then to be faced with these blue sunflowers that if you hadn't pointed out and explained the problem with, I think I would have been pretty accepting of those as legit. So quite a quick and humbling lesson of obvious is not universal. I think it's useful to be reminded of that. It never hurts to be a little more understanding. Really, really good point, and lovely post there. And I'd still chalk that up as a win, because we all have weaknesses, and denying that we have weaknesses is a weakness. Acknowledging that we have weaknesses, learning about them so that we can steer ourselves around them, perhaps we can strengthen those spots, is the strength. So I still chalk that up as a win, to know that you actually realised that you had a weak spot. It's not a weakness. Everybody has weak spots. If anybody tells you otherwise, they're just deluding themselves. So I thought that was really lovely, actually, and underlines my point. I am not going to stop going on about this, that you don't have to be an idiot to be scammed. Certainly it helps, but everyone has vulnerable points, and scammers are trying everything. Next one was on the Weymouth Slow TV. These must take such effort to collate and edit, such a peaceful, gentle effect. Felt like being on the ferry and present for a thorough wander. A winter day at Bowley's Cove will retain the bedtime slot, but this will be lovely for a future afternoon when a quieter mind as of wont. Thank you again for taking the time and effort to make this and share it with all of us. Well, thank you. It warms my heart to know that people enjoy the content that I make, and Slow TV especially, because it's not that popular. It's not for everyone, but the people that like it really do like it, and more power to you. As an interesting point though, the Slow TV series, the videos in that series are generally the most pleasant to make and the most enjoyable to make. So yeah, that Weymouth one was a bit of an exception, because I went down there one day, got some fantastic shots. When I got it back, I found I'd forgotten to lock down the focus on my camera, and it was hunting. Every time a boat went through the scene, the focus was hunting, and it just ruined the whole effect. So I went back the next day with 2 cameras and made sure I locked down the focus, and I took duplicates of every shot. So I had a camera on the tripod and I had a different camera clamped on the side of the tripod. Made sure I got duplicates of every shot, got some good footage, and made the video. But it was still a lovely day out, because all I'm really doing is walking around a harbour, taking in the view, standing there quietly, enjoying the things that actually you might be enjoying if you're watching the video. So it is quite restorative, and it's making those videos is perhaps a little bit more restorative than actually just watching them. I've got one coming up. It might be published by the time you watch this video, where I've just stood out in the garden and watched the bumblebees pollinating the flowers. And I spent a couple of whole days standing out in the garden just watching bees to get the footage for that. But also, standing and watching bees for 2 days is such a healing thing. And I've also learned some interesting things about bees that I need to talk about, actually, because there's a bit of a mystery going on with the bumblebees in my garden. Spoilers, why do bumblebees visit the same kind of flower in series when lots of different flowers are available? Why do bees tend to choose one species of flower? It's not specialization per species, because I saw the same species of bumblebee going to toadflax, and I saw the same species of bumblebee going to foxgloves or to cranesbill or to the woundwort plants. So it's not that a species of bee specializes with a species of flower, but it is that individual bees decide, I'm only going to collect from this species of flower on this visit, or maybe for this day, or maybe for their lifetimes, I don't know. But obviously that's hugely beneficial to the flowers, because that means pollination happens. No use if the pollen from one plant goes to a different species, it won't pollinate. So it's hugely advantageous to the plants to have the bees doing that thing, but
Why do the bees do it? When there are nectar sources from all of those plants, why do the bees specialise? I think the answer might be that no individual nest of bees is competing with itself. If they all choose, individual bees choose, I'm going to do toadflax, and a different bee says, I'm going to do woundwort, then those bees from that colony aren't competing with each other at all. So it might be something to do with that. But how do the plants get them to do that? Because I'm pretty sure the plants kind of are in charge of the transaction. Anyway, I've just gone and digressed again. But yeah, the Slow TV series, fantastic, most enjoyable content to make. Least popular content probably on my channel, but I don't care because I really enjoy making it, and the people that do enjoy watching it really enjoy watching it. So restorative to make and hopefully enjoyable to watch. And the last comment in this section is also about the Weymouth Slow TV video. This video will be so cool with that movement filter where you can see all the small vibrations and it shimmers. So I've had a go at that. It will be right at the end of this video because, again, there are some flickering effects, so it might not be for everybody to watch. If you have photosensitivity or anything like that, you might want to skip that bit. So I've put it right at the end of this video, so when you get to that point, there's nothing else to miss afterwards. So that's the comment positivity section for this one. I think we've got a bit more cooking or something coming up.
Here in Atomic Shrimp Temporary Kitchen, I'm going to make that omelette again, or something a bit like it. I've made this a few times now. This is actually fast becoming my favourite omelette. I've got some... Look at this amazing chard. This is from the garden. It's really started to zoom now. So we've got orange, white, kind of pale purple, bright pink, bright red. That one's been munched a bit, but the person who munched it is not on there still, so that's fine. A little bit of watercress from the Littlest Watercress Farm, and some courgette flowers. We'll set those aside for a moment. And then from the downstairs garden, we've got some parsley, garlic chives, savoury, a little bit of thyme, sage, and all of this I'm just going to run the knife through it a couple of times just to chop it into pieces small enough that they won't be stringy when they're cooked. That's probably about right. I'll just toss those together so we haven't got any one thing all in one place. So that goes to the side. Broad beans. Just pick these literally right outside the temporary kitchen window here because we're in the upstairs garden. Now, if you think you don't like broad beans, I would say see if you can get some really fresh. I mean, I'll start again. If you think you don't like broad beans and you're amenable to having your mind changed, try and get hold of some that are really fresh. I mean, maybe a pick your own farm or something like that if you've got access to one of those. And cook them really lightly. So just like saute them for a minute in butter. It's a completely different vegetable to your broad beans that you might buy frozen in the supermarket, and you cook them by boiling them for 20 minutes and they come out like bullets. It is a completely different thing when they're fresh, and I mean these are quite young as well. Some goat's cheese this time. Hard goat's cheese, that's all I can tell you about that. It's hard goat's cheese. I'll have this grated ready. I think with the last time I made this omelette, I just chopped my cheese up into slices. This time I'm going to grate it. That's plenty. So while we're here, I'm going to put some nutmeg straight on that cheese. So a bit of grated nutmeg straight on there. I'm going to put a bit of black pepper on the beans. And then I don't need to really think about assembly too much. So over here at the little camp stove, a little bit of butter, a little bit of olive oil. I just happen to like that combination. So first thing to go in is my beans and black pepper. I'm just going to give them a minute in that butter. And yeah, if you can get hold of some really fresh broad beans, go and make friends with somebody who's got an allotment, get hold of some really fresh broad beans, and look at that, they're splitting open already. Those are almost done. They've been in the pan 30 seconds. Because of course when they're fresh and young like this, you can eat them raw. Right, turn the heat down. My courgette flowers are going to go in now. These are a little bit tricky because they were both kind of duplicate flowers. They were fasciated, I think the word is. So this might not be quite such a pretty omelette coming out. We'll see. There's one. And then the last one. A bit tricky. I should have probably done this in the morning. Maybe this is a lunchtime meal. Okay. And then all of my herbs around the outside. Just give those a chance to wilt down a bit. And we will remember that the flowers are kind of in a line along here, because when I fold the omelette, I'll try and fold it these two sides in. Turn that back up a second, just to wilt those leaves a tiny bit. I can see they're starting to change colour now. They won't take very long. I shook most of the moisture off them, so there's not very much moisture to drive off apart from what's inside the leaves. Okay, pretty much good to go now. 2 eggs beaten and very slightly seasoned. Tiniest jiggle just to make sure the egg is holding everything together and it's got to all the corners of all the vegetables and stuff. And then the cheese, sharp cheese, nutmeg and green herbs. Fantastic combination. We turn that side over. Oh, almost broken it. I'm just going to let that just cook now, just to completely set the egg. Okay, I think we'll just have some beautiful heirloom tomatoes. Because this is a dinner, we'll have a bit of ham on the side, which just leaves the garnish. Overboard on the petals there. So there we go, garden omelette. Okay, so also atomic shrimp temporary dining room. Let's have a look at this omelette. So inside the cheese has gone all melty. It kind of combines with the egg and forms a sauce. So it sometimes might look a little bit like it's underdone, but the egg and the cheese almost make like the soft centre of a souffle. I cannot tell you how good that tastes. Just all of the freshness of the garden, plus goat's cheese, plus herbs, plus egg. It's just very beautiful. So I've made this about 4 or 5 times now, and I'm going to keep on refining this, I think, because, well, I don't know about refining it actually. I'm going to keep on making different versions of this. It is so good. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you again soon.